I lead with my story just to show people that it's okay to start wherever you are. There's not one definition of being Filipina, and you're always Filipino enough.
You're listening to the Architect My Life podcast, a show dedicated to empowering women architects and designers to achieve business growth, financial freedom, and health and wellness. I'm Shlachter, your host and CEO of MGS Global Group. Our company provides Revit, ArchiCAD, and CAD drafting services to busy architects and design firm owners. MGS Global started as a part-time gig when I was a new mom, but it has now grown into a thriving business that provides drafting support to creatives, helping everyone maintain a healthy work-life balance. This podcast is proudly presented by MGS Global Group. Now let's dive into this episode. Hi everyone, our guest this week is Krystl Fabella of Filipina on the Rise. Krystl is the founder of Filipina on the Rise, a media company and #1 podcast spotlighting impactful Filipino women around the world with over 50,000 plus listeners. She has been listed in New York City Journal's Top 30 Women to Watch Out For in 2022. Immigrating to the US at age 7, Krystl grew up noticing the lack of women that looked like her in media in various industries. In 2019, while working in San Francisco Tech, a Google search for quotes inspiring Filipino women resulting in objectifying pages. This lit a fire to start a podcast and promote Filipina excellence. Since then, Filipina on the Rise has amassed a following of tens of thousands around the world and produces everything from nationwide pop-up events, shows interviewing award-winning names, and even launched the first successful Filipino-American NFT collection. Krystl has spoken at national conferences in Disney, Deloitte, and even spearheaded statewide policy for women's rights. It is her passion to advocate for those of underrepresented backgrounds and help others feel seen, represented, and encouraged to stay rising. I'm so thrilled to talk to her today. Welcome to the show, Krystl.
Thank you, Aya. It's a delight to be here. I'm truly honored and grateful.
I feel like I've known you for the last 2 years because I follow you on social, and I think what you're doing for the Filipino and Filipina community is really amazing. Tell us about a childhood experience, a person or a place that influenced you to be who and where you are right now in your career.
Awesome. Thanks. Two immediate people come to mind, but I'm actually going to mention the third more specifically. So the two actually happen to be my mom and dad. And this is interesting because we immigrated here when I was 7. And they came here with the expectations, the common expectations of their kids going to be doctors or nurses, right? And really only paving that path because that's what they knew, right? And with that, as an overachiever and people pleaser and just someone who wanted to perform for everybody and tell everybody that I wanted to be a surgeon and make my parents proud growing up, deep down inside, I was always drawn to creative things in the community, building things for the community. I was really attracted to entrepreneurs, and there was just no one to pave that path for me. But really interestingly enough, my dad was always the one who, whether he knew it or not, was really pushing and challenging my mind to think bigger. He would talk to me about political events, about current events that was happening economically, and how I would find the solution for those. What would I do given this governmental situation? What would I do if I was the CEO of this company that just crashed and burned? And he did that to me at a young age. So I really give it to him for stretching my mind and telling me that I was worthy of asking these big questions, even if I looked like someone that didn't belong there, right? And secondly, my mom, even though she was always saying, like, if you're a nurse, then you're going to have a safe route, be a nurse first, and go to the hospital healthcare route first, because that'll give you safety, right? It's something very common that we often face, Asian Americans, first generation immigrants, in hearing those common tropes and advices. However, she was also saying to me, don't always work under the man. Don't always work under the big boss. Think of an idea. You have to think of an idea that will allow you to make your own money. Since I was young, she was always bringing up these different products and different companies and founders and telling me about them and really inspiring me to see their journeys. And she was always saying, you have to think of an idea that gets you outside of the system. You have to think of an idea that gets you not always working for the man, because you're always going to be working your whole life and just asking for their paycheck. You have to think outside the box. And so it's interesting because my parents, while they were encouraging me on these conventional paths, they were also the ones who was challenging me. And I think it was because they were doing it in the way that they could. They didn't know how to advise me in these careers of finance, of business, of just anything outside of the healthcare and medicine. But that I believe that was their way of doing it. So that leads me to my third person. When I was in college, and I entered college pre-med, right? I wanted to basically live that dream that my parents wanted me to be, like a doctor in America. But it dawned on me pretty early on that this was not the path for me. And in a moment, I remember looking at the hospital at UC San Diego, and it was an instant second. I was just like, I can't do it. I can't do it. It's just like an instant second. I said, I can't do it. And so I remember looking to change my major and picking up the phone to give my parents that disappointing phone call. And in a shaky voice, I said, Dad, I'm sorry to let you down, but I don't think I'm going to be in pre-med. I can't do medicine anymore. I'm going to have to change my major. I can't do this anymore. And he said, what do you want to change it to? And I said, honestly, I don't know, but I'm just ready to explore that. And I hope that this isn't a big disappointment. And much to my surprise, he actually really took it in and nodded. And he said, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that you're doing this. I always had a feeling. And I remember the following few days after that was a big realization that my parents weren't disappointed that I was doing that I had an open path ahead of me, that I could now choose wherever I wanted to go. And my dad, he called me back and he said, look, I don't have a lot of connections in the routes that you want to. I work in the hospital. However, I do know the VP of finance at the hospital we work at, and she happens to be Filipina. And this was a game changer for me because that following summer, my dad pulled some strings and set me up to intern under the VP of Loma Linda University Medical Center. And this is something a lot of us, when we are first or second generation immigrants in a new country, we find that often in these other spaces, what actually gets people to where they need to be career wise and to progress and advance is less about merit and hard work. We find out there's a lot of connections that happen. It's about being pulled up, a lot of mentorship, a lot of that, that mentorship through the corporate ladder, mentorship through these fields. And we don't have that growing up. And we always just think it's a lot about hard work, but a lot of times what gets us places is being able to walk through the right doors and talk to the right people and shake hands. Now we can see this as, wow, everybody else has a leg up to us, and they're further along because they have legacy, because they have the right name, the right, connections. But I would say that this is the beautiful part of finding a Filipina leader in the right spaces, because once you're in that door, it just works its own kind of empowering, inspirational magic, right? And mindset shift to what's possible for us. Because that summer when I interned under the VP at the hospital, for once I got to sit in a space and I saw all these older white men and this Filipina, this brown Filipino, when I was so used to seeing a Filipina as, a nurse or a doctor, which there's nothing wrong with that. But she was commanding the room. What that did was open my mind to all the things that was possible, and the authority in her voice, the commanding presence, and the ability to be a leader in this space of mostly white men. It really opened my mind to what was possible for me. So those are people that inspired me growing up.
First of all, what a great answer. I can totally relate to being an overachiever and people pleaser as a Filipina. Number two, I live in Cleveland, Ohio, and there are two big hospitals here. People always think I'm a nurse or a doctor or a caregiver, whatever. I'm like, sorry, I'm a creative. But also, it's nice that your parents really, planted the seed in your head to get out of the system and to be your own boss. I think that's really, really empowering to know that as Filipino immigrants, it's good to do the safe route, but they really pushed you. And to see that person in the room who was a Filipina in the room in finance. It's so refreshing to see and very inspiring, right? So, how do you believe that being Filipina has influenced your outlook on your life today?
Well, this is an interesting question because there's a lot of irony, right, in me running this platform Filipina on the Rise because I grew up most of my life never feeling really connected to it. I actually pushed it away. When I grew up, I didn't feel a lot of belonging in my Filipino community. So therefore, I just not only didn't feel like it resonated with me, but I felt like other communities, other cultures was just much more fascinating and relatable to me because those were the careers I wanted to be in. I just wanted, I liked people who were open minded and thinking outside of the box. And I had this assumption that my own community, that we, stayed inside the box and stayed small. And of course, that's wrong. That it's just because most of us overrepresented, right, in certain careers. But because of that, I never really knew what it meant to be proud to be Filipina until recently when a few years ago when I was working in tech in San Francisco, I was going through a really hard time in my life, career wise, and in my personal life. And one day when I was in the Uber, I just pulled up my phone and all I wanted to find was empowering stories of Filipino women because somehow this was going to ignite some strength in me, right? Just I was always following Asian American women, women of color, but for some reason that day, in order to overcome all this, defeat and this weakness that I was feeling, I started just scouring the web for stories of empowering Filipino women when I never cared about it before. In college, I was always in different organizations. I was joining like a lot of white sororities. A lot of people had made fun of the fact that I was always hanging around with like, white people, for lack of better words. And I never really thought much of my own identity until this moment when I was desperately trying to find stories that resonated with my cultural background. And when I couldn't find any, I pulled up podcasts, there was nothing. I pulled up YouTube, there was nothing. When I pulled up Google, there was nothing. Not only that, what would come up was why Filipino women make good mail order brides or brides to come home, or how to date Filipino women in the Philippines, right? And it was just really objectifying and fetishizing. And I just remember thinking, is this what's out there about us? I was shocked. And I was really at first saddened and then I was angered. And then that anger propelled me to say, I have to find these stories. I know these women are out there. And it became my mission in that moment to find the stories of women in diverse industries, if not for other people, at least for me, right? At least to know that they were out there. I wanted to find women in law, in media, in who are authors, in interior design and engineers and all those things. And from that point on, that's when the mission of Filipino on the Rise started as a podcast first and now as this multimedia platform. And since then, because of my journey of finding these women, have also found it was my journey of finding what our culture, what our heritage, what our history really was. And so now my outlook has changed to see that Filipino women, we have always been here. We've always been out here doing big things, whether it was us as leaders and commanders in our wars in history, right? In World War II, or whether it was us in America as it's trailblazing as CEOs or entrepreneurs, and as like being part of these activist and social revolution movements, right? That Filipino women have always been out here, that we are extremely resilient, that we can take whatever life throws at us and create something out of it. Like that's why we're very resourceful and crafty. I've also found that Filipina women are very multi-talented, multivariate. At the event that I just threw in San Diego last week, we've had national pop-up events for the past 2 years. And this is something that I find with every event that we have, because we have vendors that we're multifaceted, multi-talented. Even you, Aya, you have a business in Cebu right now, and you are at a architectural firm, right? And so this is just
Yeah.
something that we're I think makes us so unique that we could do all these things that we've never just been one definition. And how funny that, society or history has tried to put us in a box when by nature we are doing 100 things at once, and we're always connected to the community at the end of the day. And that's lastly like how I want to really promote what being Filipina is, that through everything that we're doing, we are so connected to the community. We always want to look for ways to align our company's mission and values to the community. I've found that with almost every single woman that I bring on the podcast, and I have as, who are a business owner, they're always aligning their goals and their values with giving back. And I think that's really tied to kapwa, and that's a Filipino value. It's a pillar, it's a main core value of Filipino people, kapwa, which is seeing the other person in yourself, seeing the other in you. So in everything that we do, we're always infusing how do we have empathy and bring in other people outside of our community and see the other in ourselves. And that's what being Filipino in my outlook has been.
That's amazing. But I want to take a little step back because a lot of Filipinas probably don't want to be
Yeah.
nurses or doctors, right? So, what gave you the courage and what was it like transitioning from like tech to doing this? Because a lot of us are very obedient and we just do what our parents say. Lucky for you and I, we didn't really follow the typical Filipino career path. But how was it possible for you financially in general? Like for people who work in tech and want to do other things, like what was the
Yeah.
practically speaking, what was it like to
Okay.
transition?
Let's get real about this, because there's this glamorized look about entrepreneurship and being a founder, right? But we also have to be very practical about that pivot. You have to be practical about pivoting, and you have to know when the right timing and the right priorities of things are. And I want to talk about my pivot journey. So, when I started out, I was in San Francisco working in a tech company, right? And when I started this, it was never about starting a business or a multimedia company. I just wanted to start a podcast that told stories. And so I think people immediately think of like, how do I change my career? How do I start a business? How do I run this company? How do I, they think so big, and it could also be daunting. But the important thing is just start something that you're curious about. Start something that you naturally want to learn how to do and help other people along the way. Because once you're doing that, you're just refining your service, your product, your offering, whatever this is. And it has to be something you're personally connected to and you find fun. That's the beginning of the pivot. It's not even thinking about this business idea. I'm coaching my mom right now who wants to pivot out of clinical lab science, like in the hospital, and she's just like, "Well, what's my? I can't just jump. I can't just jump from the hospital and like not make any money." I'm like, "No one's telling you to jump." I think that's for like the privileged rich people, right? Who could just jump and their parents are going to give them a bunch of money. We don't have the luxury of doing that. That's great if you do, but we just don't. It's not smart. So my advice is to find what you're actually passionate about and learn how to make a sustainable product first. Just learn how to do it, learn how to make this something that works, that you're serving people with. And during that, it's okay to stay with your full-time role. It's okay to have that sustain you financially. And I did that for about 3 years, because if you're making enough money where you are, that is leverage for you to fund your business, your product, your idea. I always say that the CEO of my last company was my angel investor and he doesn't know it. And so like every paycheck that I was going I had, like dividing it, putting some of it to the business and things that I was spending, whether that was my podcast equipment, my travels, my overhead expenses, my MailChimp, my all that stuff that is costly, right? When you're starting something. So use that. And then you're gonna naturally find that tango, that dance with when it's time to start putting your left foot and your right foot here and there, and that you could put your feet more on the other part. And so about last year, So I don't just do the podcast. So a year ago was when it really hit on me that I had to choose. I had to choose between two things because I was spread so thin, and I wasn't doing full quality at either of them. And at this point, Filipino on the Rise, we had the podcast running bi-weekly. We had monthly events around the country that I was traveling to at 70 to 100 people attendance. And we had our Filipino Soul Sisterhood, which is our global membership for Filipino women to gather and learn from each other. We had like workshops and discussion circles, and we just were launching things left and right. And I just couldn't focus anymore. So I had to really choose. I was like, do I have enough finances to sustain me for the next year or two to really focus on this? Do I have enough savings for that? Okay, yes, check that off. Whatever that means for you, your budget and your expenses and your endeavors are, right? Second, do I have a tested and tried product that provides and generates revenue? Yes. Is it going to get me at my level that I was at tech wise? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But is it revenue generating? Yes. Is there a way to scale this? Yes. Is there a way to scale this in 6 months to a year where we can make X amount that we're going to feel good at? Yes. All right. Then it's time to jump and go. And so that is kind of the journey for me. And I will say I was very blessed because my tech company was, I had shares in it. So a lot of the money that I was actually fueling to my business was from having RSUs, right? And so I just want to be really real and transparent about where that's coming from because I feel like a lot of us aren't sharing where the money is and where it's going. I wasn't funding any of this with Filipino on the Rise at all. I barely am right now. I'm still using a lot of tech money. So that is how I'm practically seeing it. And now the pivot is to be able to to generate and go to like six figures within this year and so on, right? But I think that is my piece of advice of like it's okay to stay stable. It's okay to use your current role and work on your business or product on the side. And just really find who you're serving first, and then you're going to know when it's time to pivot, and then you're going to know where your finances is going to come from when you're going to sustain from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really powerful when you said you find somebody to serve. One of my favorite quotes is because a lot of women and creatives don't like to
Mm-hmm.
sell, but one of my favorite quotes is by J. Abraham. If you have a product or a service that could help other people, it's your moral obligation to
Mm,
share it. So I think this is what you're doing, in my opinion, for Filipina on the Rise, because we really are underrepresented and people don't know about us, right, in general. Um, I remember because, well, I grew up in the Philippines, but spent half of my, 18 to 31 in New York City. And people called us the invisible minority. There are no Filipino restaurants. There's nothing about the Filipinos that's obvious. Like, for instance, Thai people, right? There's so many Thai restaurants, but the population of Thai people in this country is not even half of the Filipinos, right? So,
yeah. Yeah, and I was going to mention that we are the second largest Asian American, not counting Indian Americans, but second largest Asian Americans in the United States.
and yet people don't even know where the Philippines is.
Exactly. And they don't know what our contributions to this country is. Yeah.
So my other question is, like, we're both immigrants from the same country. I moved to the US when I was 19, you at age 7. So I'm pretty much like half Filipina, half Filipino, and half American, right? Because I spent a lot of time in the Philippines. Like, so you and I have different diverse backgrounds, although we're still very Filipino, right? So how do you ensure that the Filipina on the Rise remains inclusive and welcoming? The Filipinos who moved here when you're 7, moved here when you're 18, or like recently moved here. So that's all very different culturally. We're different in terms of like our age, our upbringing, our value system. So how do you kind of ensure that it's inclusive and
Yeah.
welcoming?
I lead with my story just to show people that it's okay to start wherever you are. And you are, no matter if you're half or you've been here you're a first generation immigrant, or you were born here, or wherever you are in the world, that there's not one definition of being Filipina, and you're always Filipino enough, right? And so with my story, I feel like that's what invites people in to realize that, oh, this is a all-inclusive space that it doesn't matter where my background is from, right? This is where I can feel belonging to find other women that look like me, that are in other industries like me, and that we can have these relatable experiences. And then my mission for Filipino on the Rise is to spotlight Filipino women doing big things, making an impact, empower our community and our world through our stories, telling the world about us and show that we're a force to be reckoned with, and ultimately to promote Filipina excellence and celebrate all that it means to be a Filipina. And so by that mission and definition, it's open to everyone. And when I mean everyone, I mean even like non-Filipinos who want to learn about our culture, because that's ultimately where I want this to go. That it's not just about us, staying about us. It's about like expanding our stories and our inspiration and what we can contribute to the other communities and people around us.
So that's really very inclusive. I feel that power because sometimes I also feel like I don't belong
Mm-hmm.
because I lived half of my life in the Philippines. I didn't really grow up here, but it's good that I'm able to find my
Yes.
tribe. I finally found my tribe
Yeah.
here in Cleveland who are not nurses. No offense to the nurses, but I found my tribe here
Oh,
and they're all creative, so I'm pretty
yeah.
psyched about that. So, can you tell us a little bit about the Filipina Soul Sisterhood and what it does and how to be part
Yes.
of that?
Oh, awesome. The Filipina Soul Sisterhood is a global membership community. I would say it's like a social club where you find your aligned Filipina tribe. It's a sisterhood that awaits any Filipino woman who is looking to reconnect with her culture, reconnect with her roots, and also feel professionally and personally like growing alongside other Filipino women. That this journey is not meant to be alone in, right? We're not meant to do this journey of life alone. And oftentimes when we want to start journeying back to our heritage, our history, it could be daunting. Asking all these big questions, right? It can be daunting. And it could just feel like, where do I start? So why not have fun doing it? Why not have other Filipino alongside you who are in media, who are in tech, who are in architecture and design and stuff, that you can look your left and right and say, oh my goodness, you're just like me. We're going through the same thing, and they're from all around the world. So you get to learn about your their experiences too. And what it looks like is that we meet weekly, and we have different guest instructors and workshop leaders, and basically Filipino women who are leaders at their industries coming in, teaching us, holding space with us, and letting us like really gather under different themes. So we've had themes about, you know, being Filipina enough, or financial empowerment, and decolonizing. We've even had themes around being brown is beautiful, different themes around unlocking the powerful Panay and what that means, and overcoming perfectionism as a Panay, because so much of us are on perfectionism. So these themes that we can all relate to, we're gathering weekly, we're having instructors, we're having professors, we're having company leaders who are all Filipino women come in. They're industry experts, they're authoritative voices, they're authors, and they are just gathering. We are having discussions, we're having workshops, we're having master classes, masterminds, and it's just so much fun. It's like it's a true magical experience every time. And this relaunches in January. So I really hope that if you wanted to join or even come and teach a session, you can.
So you're
Yes,
relaunching it
yes,
in January,
yes.
you said?
2024,
2024.
and we're prepping. We have an amazing calendar ahead. We have like healers, we have women who lead negotiation workshops. We have the full spectrum, and they're all Pinays. And we can even have you, Aya, coming and talking about what does it mean to design and architect, your house, your life.
First of all, I'm gonna tell you congratulations. Building an audience, launching a membership site is it's a lot of
Yeah.
hours on social. It's a lot of hours hustling. I mean,
You know it then. You know the
I
hustle.
tried to do that during COVID. Really, it's very difficult. But you've already, how many people do you have on Instagram
We
now?
have 40,000 plus, and then across all our channels, I would say we have like 60,000 in our community and growing.
So that's why actually how I met you through Instagram. I feel like I know
Aw.
you and you're traveling all over and like doing all these little fairs, and it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and the last week in San Francisco, was it?
So San Diego's last week, and we're going to San Francisco on Thursday.
Yeah, but last week was like, whoa, it was over 100
Yeah.
people. So in what way has social media helped you build your sense of community?
Mhm.
And how did like how did people find you in general? Like how did all that
I know.
happen?
So social media, Instagram has been tantamount to building the community. I feel like that is where the main core community is. And although I'm always like, social media can be like toxic and we create boundaries around it, at the same time, when used right, it's a tool for good, for gathering people, for building a community. And it's interesting because with that how to of how this has grown, I feel like it was a little bit of where hard, opportunity to say is where preparation meets luck, right? And I also feel like this there was a little bit of like a divine initiation to this. And when I thought of this idea for Filipino on the Rise, I threw a fun little mini podcast launch party in San Francisco just to make a big deal out of it because I love throwing parties and themes. And I didn't really expect it to be anything big. I just wanted to start this project. And then when I started the podcast, I made a new Instagram, and I just remember thinking of the name for it on that second. And I was next to my sister and I was like, what do you think of this? Like, how does this sound? She's like, that sounds good. And I was like, okay, let me make the podcast. I started it. And I knew that if I announced something that I would be held accountable to this. This is something that I call an accountability vice of like when you're doing things in secret, then you can make 1,000 excuses for it, right? But when you've announced it to people and you've involved people into it and you're getting people to like, anticipate it, then you're like, you got to do it. And so it's a little bit of that. So I was like, if I announce people about it, then hopefully this is a project that I'll take seriously. And then through Instagram community, then I can tell people that these episodes are coming out and that I can hopefully find other guests. And so when I started it, um, I just opened it up. I said, hey everyone. I posted pictures of this podcast party that we had. I was like, we're launching a new podcast. I'm launching a podcast called Filipino on the Rise. I want to spotlight Filipino women in diverse industries. And it honestly, in a weird way, I remember following a few accounts that were related. And I just messaged a few people. I announced it on my personal Instagram, which, people in my personal were just like supportive of it. But it kind of just grew from there organically. And I think one, because the name itself, and this is why choosing a name can be very important. It it's already self-explanatory, right? And you've probably never seen anything like that. And it draws in the person who's looking for something like that. So when you think of Filipino on the Rise, it sparks something of growth, of like, oh, I'm not familiar with seeing things like that, like growing up. I want to know what that means. And so I think that the name in itself was already, a little provoking and enough for people to come in. At the same time, my social media game is pretty good. Like I gotta say, Like my content.
It's excellent, not good. It's excellent. No, it's off the charts, Krystl.
Thank you. And I want to say that because there is a part of that it has to be like there's hard work, right? In this. Like social media is hard work, content creation is hard work. But I think what made it fun in the beginning was that it felt like natural to me. And that's advice that I want to give to people. Create content that you're excited about. Create content that is around your curiosity. Create content that you don't care if no one sees it. You're just like, I'm so proud of this. Like this is important for me to post on there. And so in the beginning, I was like posting stuff about, oh, we just had this episode and um she talked about career changes and building a business. Here's what we talked about. And then I would get on there and I would like make stories about what I found was like important about this in my life. And I was just doing that on a consistent basis. And I think because I was so passionate about all these women that I was bringing on, not just because of the podcast, but because I was personally so excited about finding these women in these spaces and industries that I'd never heard of before. I was personally excited and invested, and people can feel that. People can resonate with that energy. Anytime that my content, I feel like I'm slowing down and I'm not like I'm not happy about it. I'm not, I'm dreading it, which happens a lot, honestly, like a journey of a content creator. And it's because like you're not excited about it anymore. You're just posting out of obligation or it doesn't resonate with you. And people can sometimes feel that. And so I feel like that's why I grew so much because and I want to lend this to anybody. I felt like there was a personal approach to it. There was a personal experience that I was sharing. There was a personal like excitement and gift that I had with each of my posts and videos and my episodes. And lastly, everyone always talks about vulnerability and like your personal brand and bring your story into it. 100% that's really important. But I think vulnerability is not just like, oh my gosh, I have to like dump something that's going on in my life right now. Vulnerability is sharing the journey that you're on and showing how you're growing through it, what you're doing through it, what values you're getting through it, what you're building through it. That's meaningful vulnerability. That's value added vulnerability. And that's what we need more of on social media. And I believe that's how you grow your community and following because you want to bring people into your story and have people feel like their story resonates, that they're being seen, that they're being heard, that their story it fits in somewhere in this crazy big world.
Yeah, so I asked about what aspect of architecture and design you want to talk about, and you mentioned community engineering. I architect spaces where people can gather and connect intentionally. So, we've seen that, like, obviously, I was drawn to you because I can relate to your experiences. How does it feel to be in a room with all these people coming to see you and connect? Like, what was it like for you to attend your event and you were shocked to see like hundreds of people? Like, what
Oh
was
my
it like?
goodness. Thank you for this question, Aya, because I feel like sometimes I don't savor those moments enough. I just rush on to the next, or we're always like building for other people and we're just pushing them to the front or going on to the next. Like I'm already hurrying off to my next event. And I never really take in moments sometimes. I struggle with that. And this last event, I was trying to be more present for it. And so as I reflect on that, I mean, people were coming up and wanting to meet or like introduce themselves, and that usually happens at events. I find that people just really want to say hello and tell them what the podcast is like.
Take
Yeah.
your
Take
photos.
photos. Yeah.
You're like
Yeah,
celebrity
it's
girl.
so funny the whole photos thing. And I was just like I forget that it's because I've like really in I've put myself as a personal as someone, like I've shared my stories online and whatever, and I'm constantly like interfacing with like social media. That okay, that makes sense that they're not just like, oh, I'm here for like this generic Filipina empowerment networking event, that I think because people come to things because they feel welcome. And I feel like, in a way, I've been a party host for people this past few years, right? And when they come, they want to kind of meet the host of the party, and they want to like meet somebody that maybe they've heard a story or two that they resonated with. And so I guess how it feels is that it could feel flattering, I guess. I mean, throughout the event, people were coming up and saying, like, this has meant so much to me. And can we take your photo? Can we take photos? And my mom was standing there and even being like, whoa, like everybody, you know,
Who
yeah.
are you,
she
Krystl?
was she was just kind of like, oh, this is actually a thing.
Oh, she's
Yeah.
legit.
But I will say it's really it's meant a lot because I have to remember I'm working so much on online and social media, but there's a person at the end of the day that it's reaching. There's a person whose life is is being spoken into. There's a woman behind this who's going through something. And there's a human behind the digital world that we're reaching. And she's taking time to come here and to say to meet with other people, but to say hello to me. And that's a huge honor for me, right? That I've in some way personally affected someone's life or something. And it's not just me, right? There's a whole team. There's not a whole team, it's me and one other person, but there's a whole like community behind this, and that's what we're doing. But it's like so encouraging to remember that this is actually meeting people where they're at. I get really lost sometimes behind the screen because I'm always creating for these like digital avatars and I never get to meet anybody. They're just these like
Yeah.
little avatars, and I'm really good at understanding the collective voice, right? And the collective conscience. That's what kind of like one of my divine gifts is, tapping into the collective conscience and seeing what needs to be created and then building it. When you do that, oh, what was that?
Empathy. I think it's really
Empathy.
empathy. It's
Yeah.
empathy,
Yeah.
right? Like knowing what other people, you can relate to them and
Yeah.
empathize with
Yeah.
everyone.
You're absolutely right. Empathy and creating based off of that. So when I get to meet and like hug and, you know, like take pictures with people, it does affirm, it's very validating, right? To say like, oh, what we're building here, it's impacting people's lives and whatever. But second, it's a gift to me. Like I need it. It's nourishing for me. It's filling for me. I never get to meet like to interface with people on a day to day. So I'm really thankful for those moments. And I just feel like we're family at the end of the day. I just feel like everyone's like family. And I'm grateful that like that I get to that like God has like given me this role to be a conduit of light, to be a vessel for other people. And I have to like humble myself a little bit to say like, yes, although like I am, let's say, the face of this, I'm just like kind of like the door, the entryway for people to see like it's safe to come in here. We like this is where you belong. This is a sisterhood where you belong. But once I open that door and let people walk in, it's not about me. It's about the possibilities. It's about the women that you can meet. It's about the places that we can go together. And I'm just like grateful to God to be a vessel for that.
And this is just the beginning, Krystl. What? This is only 3 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so remember, this is just the beginning. You're still going to explode worldwide.
Good Lord. I mean, I would love that, and I would just love that together with a team and just, to do
Yeah,
an experience with more
because
people.
Filipinos like to talk like you should follow this girl, you should follow that, like, and it's pretty awesome what you're doing. A few more questions before we wrap up. You said you made up a first ever education course, community Filipina
Yes.
history. Can you
Yeah.
talk about that? Because my kids moved here when they were, I think, 4 and
Hmm.
7. So, like, who is this course for? Can you talk a little bit about the
Yes.
course?
So this course is called Filipina History, learning the history of the Philippines through a feminist lens. And who this is for is basically for anyone who wants to learn Filipino history in a empowering, inspiring, and female lens way. And it's because so many of us don't know about Philippines history, right? And in order to know where you're going and who you are, you need to know where you come from. We have to know our history. It hasn't been explicitly taught to us in textbooks and classrooms. And maybe if it has, it's been very much at the context of Western, history or through, a more a, it's smaller lens and it's mostly mentioning male figures, and that's fine. But when I was in the Philippines, I actually came up with this idea because I was in the Philippines in June. I was there for a month and I was going through different cities and with my history book. It was the History of the Philippines by Luis Francia. He's a professor at NYU. Very, very like comprehensive text, really well researched, well done. But I found that it was very like it felt dense and kind of heavy. And this is what happens when you learn Philippines history, just quite frankly, because there's a lot of colonization and wars and oppression and things that have happened. And as you're learning this, you feel a sense of defeatist and you're like, man, this is hard to learn. Like, and yet I'm like, but I still have to learn it. I still want to know this thing. And also I noticed that I was getting a lot of inspiration though throughout it. And this is just with a lot of things. I learn history best through stories of individual characters, through historical figures. And so, Jose Rizal, Andres Bonifacio, all those men in history.
Andres Bonifacio and I have the same birthday. I'm
Oh, are
Bonifacio
you?
Day,
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. What is his birthday again?
November 30. So every time it's my birthday, there's no school. And so none of my classmates can
Oh my
greet me.
goodness, but at least you get the day off.
Yes, that's
Yeah. Oh
true.
my goodness. So I just found
Yeah.
that mostly they were men, right? So I thought, what would it look like if we went through Filipino history but via the stories of heroic revolutionary Filipino figures? Okay. Well, are they all men? Are they mostly men? And that's when I started digging and I found the story of Clemencia, and she has a remarkable story that resonated with me because I found out that she like was this activist and she traveled to the United States to speak on behalf of her brothers to free them, that she went to the White House and this was like in the early 1900s, and she gave a speech to the feminist movements. And I just thought, how did I never know about this? And so I started uncovering
I,
more.
I just got goosebumps.
Right. Exactly. I started uncovering more and I realized there was other women. There was like Gabriela Silang, right? And Captain Nieves, who was during like the Japanese occupation, she taught like soldiers how to like she was like a guerrilla warfare leader. She was a school teacher, guerrilla warfare leader, but she also like was seen as really dangerous by the Japanese soldiers because so they had a bounty for her because she was teaching people how to behead like Japanese soldiers.
Oh my God.
And like these are like different stories that we just like never knew about. And I found that there were so many Filipino women who were commanders in the wars and guerrilla fighters, and they were just like founders of and inventors. And I was like, we never knew about this. So what would it look like to learn Filipino history through these women? And we launched our first one this past month, right? And it immediately filled up. And immediately like people just joined. There's already waitlist for the next one. But I found that the reason why this resonates so much is because people are so hungry to learn their history and they want to do it through a like this optimistic, empowering lens, and to see that we were not always defeated. That what I took away from this learning course that I put together with the help of like two other women, that we were always leaders throughout. We were always these revolutionary women throughout history. Our stories were just never told. And once you start to learn it, it becomes a more colorful way of learning history. You get to, that's how we want to learn about like the end of Spanish colonization. That's how we want to learn about the American War. That's how we want to learn about the 20th century. And throughout this history course, it's 25 days and it's called 25 days of Filipina history, right? So just straight and
So is it 25 days of live like Zoom? Like is it
so
live?
there's daily learning drops. So it's online curriculum that every day we unlock a new lesson for you, and it's a new woman and the historical lesson around that. And we also let you know what was going around in the Philippines during that time, what was happening in the world historically during that time. So really positioning and contextualizing that story in the context of the world, right? And you just start to connect the dots. And it's really fascinating. We'll have also some live sessions, we'll have discussion groups throughout the weeks. And then we also bring on, this is the most, like, this has been the most amazing part. We bring on other instructors and teachers and lecturers. So our first lecturer is a Filipina historian. She's and she talks about the kaleidoscope of Filipino history through the feminine lens. And then the second one is another woman. She actually was she's taught. I think she's done programs at Harvard University, and she taught on pre-colonial Philippines history, which was also very amazing. And then the last we had was Carl, and he was from the University of the Philippines, and he taught about indigenous spirituality and values of Philippines. And this one just broke everyone to tears, like happy tears. It was just so magical and beautiful. And then we end with sessions to discuss this together so we can reflect and learn together. So that's coming. The next one is October. We've already hit our capacity for that one. But in the next year, it's going to be more of like a rolling course so anyone can join and join the discussion groups. And it's just been
So
so,
it's going to be a digital course, right?
yeah.
Krystl, thanks so much for everything you do for the Filipina community. I wish you were around when I was in college, but you're too young for, I'm already in my 40s,
No,
so
and you're doing big and badass things. Like I'm so proud of you. Like I look up to what you're doing. Back in my other life, I wanted to be in like interior and architecture design. So I think it's so awesome when you reached out and I'm just so curious. Can I ask you a question? How did you get into your space?
architecture. I wanted to be in fashion, but my dad said, why don't you do architecture? And, it's the foundation of all the arts. So if you don't like it, then you can do other things creative. So that's how I got into architecture. And now I've been doing it for like 20 years. And we have like around 35 full-time employees in the Philippines. So I have a team back in the Philippines. That's why I come back and
Wow.
forth. My clients are here. So it's a form of give back too. Like, I don't have a nonprofit, but I'm an entrepreneur and I provide jobs to a lot of
Amazing.
the Filipino architects and also the cafe business. So I'm very much rooted in the Philippine culture, even though I live in Cleveland. So there.
Wow.
Hopefully you can visit us in Cleveland, Krystl. Do you have plans of
Yeah.
coming to
To
Cleveland?
Cleveland, no, but we are lining up our calendar of events for next year and which cities to hit, which is which they could definitely be on the map. And as we are, that's why it's really important to have our to sustain next year's events. That's why our crowdfund is super vital to keep the programming for Filipino on the Rise going.
So where can we find you in terms of the crowdfunding? Can you share what links to, if you have any links to share?
Right. And this crowdfund, it's really a campaign. It's a way for you to back this movement that's happening. If you are passionate about seeing Filipina excellence increase and representation increase around the world, this is what will be the fuel to everything that we're doing. And it's super important because I want to be like you. I want to build a team. I want to create opportunities for more people to come on board and join this fun movement that we're doing. So that's what, this campaign is going to be going to. And I'm just really excited. It's going to be anyone who is a backer, you get a gift. So you will get different gifts and they're really awesome. And so I'm just excited everyone to partner with me on this.
So, my last question for my most of my guests: where do you see yourself in 3 years?
I always visualize and manifest this also. But in 3 years, I I have a team of 10 or 20, and I own not just property, but we have our own office. It's like the Filipino on the Rise Media Studios, and people are coming in and out. It's where we can record, it's where we can hold events, and it's where we can really bring in others outside of the community and use the space so that we are, a leader. I just see myself traveling around the world more, honestly, going to the Philippines, trying out your coffee shop, getting to just travel and speak more. I think that I'm at this place where I'm ready to like give the keys to the car a little bit and just show up more as a speaker, as an advocate. And in a weird way, I see myself going back into the role of policy advocacy and social economic justice, because that's really the heartbeat of my heart. I used to work a lot in community organizing and activism and policy advocacy. So yeah, it'd be so great to do that.
Thank you so much, Krystl. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yes, thank you so much, Aya. I did as well.
That was Krystl Fabella of Filipina on the Rise. Thanks for listening to this episode of Architect My Life, a podcast brought to you by MGS Global Group. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to add to the conversation through your own experiences, I encourage you to be a guest in one of our upcoming episodes. Visit architectmylife.com to apply and learn how. I firmly believe that a strong community drives change and fosters success. If you'd like to be part of this community, join the All Women Architect My Life Facebook group. Please take a moment to review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks again for listening. I'm Aya Shlachter. Until next time.